Welcome back. We have enjoyed a short 5-minute break. Thank you for bearing with us and being flexible. I'm Dr. Elisa Warren, Executive Director for the Missouri Commission on Human Rights, and also the first Vice President for IAOHRA. We have really had a wonderful morning so far. My heart is already full and we have just only begun. So I wanted to go ahead and take the opportunity to introduce our next session. And that is the opening plenary session entitled Worthy of Investment, Restoring Value to the Black Community. And our guest speaker today is Dr. Andre Perry. And he is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, Metro, and he's a scholar in residence at American University and a columnist at the Hechinger Report. He's also the author of a new book entitled Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities, which is currently available everywhere books are sold. He's a nationally known and respected commentator on race, structural inequality, and education. Dr. Perry is regularly a contributor on MSNBC and has been published by the New York Times, The Nation, The Washington Post, TheRoot.com, CNN.com, and he has made over 25 appearances on CNN, PBS, NPR, NBC, and ABC. How's that for some alphabet soup? That's wonderful. Dr. Perry's research focuses on race and structural inequalities, education, and economic inclusion. His recent scholarship at Brookings has analyzed Black majority cities and institutions in America, focusing on valuable assets worthy of increased investment. Since the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic began, Dr. Perry documented underlying causes for the outsized number of corona-related deaths in the Black community. Dr. Perry's Brookings research illuminated how certain forms of social distancing have historically accelerated economic and social disparities between Black people and the rest of the country. He's also mapped racial inequalities in housing, income, and health to underscore how policy discrimination makes Black Americans more vulnerable to COVID-19. His research has spotlighted the struggles of Black businesses, also including artists and art institutes, restaurants, barbershops, beauty shops, as they wait for federal relief from COVID-19 economic impact. In education, Dr. Perry explained how college campus closings put housing insecure students at risk during the pandemic. Perry also has written on the underrealized value of teachers' work that's been made apparent by COVID-19 and has commented on the potential loss of Black teachers as a result of a pending recession. Dr. Perry's academic writings have concentrated on race, structural inequality, and urban schools. Perry also co-authored the Brookings Institution report entitled The Devaluation of Assets in Black Neighborhoods, and has presented the findings of this research across the country, including to the United States House of Financial Services Committee. Dr. Perry is a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and has earned his PhD in education policy and leadership from the University of Maryland, College Park. And it is my tremendous pleasure to welcome you today with us here, Dr. Perry.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Warren. How do you go from Frankie Beverly and Mays to having read that long bio?
It put me in a happy place. I had happy feelings.
I know. Then here comes this guy with the long bio.
Yes. Well,
hello, everyone. I'm Andre Perry, and it is my pleasure to talk with the human rights community today, because largely I talk to the folks who are interested in wealth. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about housing and business development, but I always say that we should not look at housing just as a wealth builder, but it's a human right. And everyone should have the ability to work and live in the same community. And that's a lot what drives my work. In addition, we know that the built environment is inextricably linked to economic outcomes. How we literally build communities impact people's economic mobility. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you largely about today. I'm going to actually share a deck I have. Let's see here. Hopefully you can see it, but I'm going to get to presentation mode. Let's see, slideshow, play from the start. Hopefully you can see my screen. Yes, you do. Worthy of investment, restoring value to Black communities. And like as mentioned, a lot of this you can find in my book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities, available wherever fine books are sold. At the Brookings Institution, I study Black majority cities, and you can see here, I also study Black majority neighborhoods. You can see here, this is a map of the Black majority cities where the share of the Black population is 50% or higher. I also study Black majority neighborhoods, but there are too many to put on the map. But you can see there are quite a few. There's more than 1,200 Black majority cities, and I study the assets in them. So housing, businesses, infrastructure, all the things that if you invested in, it would lead to economic and social mobility. And as I mentioned, because housing has been the primary mechanism for wealth building in the United States, it is critically important to people's overall well-being. But it's also just a human right. If you don't have housing, you have worse, or if insecure housing, you have worse outcomes in health, in employment, you name it, all your outcomes are worse. And so I wanted to really look at housing as a central piece of my work. And I'm going to start with my home, the home I grew up in. This is 1320 Hill Avenue, Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania. Wilkinsburg is a small Black majority neighborhood surrounded by Pittsburgh on three sides. And as you can see, this home is in significant disrepair. The home is boarded up. It's been abandoned for years. You can pick it up by essentially agreeing to pay the taxes on it through the county it's in. But the home is worth so much more to me. You see that woman in the upper right-hand corner? Her name is Elsie Boyd. I call her Mom. As the story was told to me when I was born, she made a deal with my maternal grandmother that she would take me in from the hospital. At the time, my mother was poor. She already had a child when she was 15, she had me when she was 17. My mother was probably abused. And so Mom did what a lot of matriarchs did when children were stressed from the conditions. She took in kids. And you can see she took in a lot of kids. She took in between 12 to 15. Some would stay a few weeks, some would stay a few months. I would, and many of us, my brothers would stay till we graduated from high school. One of the reasons why she had to take us in, this is my father, Floyd Criswell. He was a heroin addict. He was in and out of prison. Like I mentioned, he probably abused my mother based upon his criminal record, but he was caught in throes of addiction for all of my life. He was eventually murdered inside of Jackson State Penitentiary, a facility outside of Detroit. Now, I heard all of my life that he made bad decisions around his life, but I wanted to look at the socio-political context that surrounded those decisions. So I started looking at the built environment. Now, I'm gonna just give a brief, very brief history lesson around what I found. now he and my mom, the woman who raised me, were in areas that were redlined, in which the homeowners loan corporation drew red lines around predominantly Black communities, deeming them too hazardous for federal investments in housing. They also lived in areas where highway construction displaced them. That's how my mom actually ended up in Wilkinsburg. She was displaced by construction around the Civic Arena. They were both had to deal with the unfulfilled promise of urban renewal. They were in areas where there was significant predatory lending, and they couldn't leave these neighborhoods because there were restrictive racial housing covenants, meaning that there were whites only neighborhoods surrounding them. But I wanted to look at home prices in these neighborhoods because we know that home values are critical to individual mobility, economic mobility, and community power. Now, on this chart, you'll see on this x-axis, that's the share of the Black population in a zip code or neighborhood. And on that y-axis is indicated on top of the bar, that's the average list price of homes in those neighborhoods. We've looked at both Zillow and census data. And so you can see in areas where the share of the Black population is less than 1%, the average list price is about $340,000. And as the percentage of the Black population increases in a neighborhood, the price goes down. So much so that in areas where the Black population is 50% or higher, the average list price is about half as much as their nearly all white counterparts or areas where the share of the Black population is at less than 1%. Now, a lot of people will say that's because of education, that's because of crime, but those are things that you can control for in a study, and that's what we did. We took that absolute list price and we controlled for structural characteristics. So we controlled for the number of rooms, the square footage, the number of windows, all those different things. And then we controlled for neighborhood amenities, education, crime, walkability, all those fancy Zillow metrics, because we wanted to get an apples to apples comparison between homes in Black neighborhoods compared to homes in white neighborhoods. And what we found pretty much astounds that homes in Black neighborhoods are underpriced by 23%, about $48,000 per home. Accumulatively, that's about $156 billion in lost equity in Black neighborhoods. And this is occurring all over the country. Wherever you see a magenta circle, that's where devaluation is occurring. Wherever you see a green circle, that's where homes in Black neighborhoods are actually priced higher than their white counterparts. Just to give you an example, in St. Louis, it's about 28%, about $30,000 per home difference. And it ranges from metro area to metro area. As you can see here, Lynchburg, Virginia, I just want folks to wrap their head around this. If you helicoptered a home in a Black neighborhood and placed it in a white neighborhood with similar social circumstances, it would increase in value by 81%. Rochester, New York, 65% difference. Jacksonville, Florida, 47% difference. Detroit, where the largest Black city in America is, there's a 37% difference in the metro area. Again, there are places where home values are actually priced higher in Black neighborhoods. Nashville, for instance, plus 10%. Wichita Falls, plus 16. Boston, plus 23. Now, Boston is no less racist than Lynchburg, but the home prices are higher. Now, I want to just put this in perspective. What is 156 billion? Because it can be abstract. We know it's a big number, but what does that really mean? 156 billion would have financed more than 4 million Black-owned businesses based upon the average amount Black people use to start their firms. It would have paid for more than 8 million four-year degrees based upon the average amount of a four-year public degree. Replaced the pipes in Flint, Michigan nearly 3,000 times over. It would have covered nearly all of Hurricane Katrina damage, and it's double the annual economic burden of the opioid crisis. It's a big number. Now, I put that last bullet there for a reason. My father, if he would have lived in a neighborhood where homes were priced at the market rate or the white rate, he would have had greater opportunity to go to college, start a business. His neighborhood would have greater resources. Remember, public schools, infrastructure, policing, all those municipal services are partly funded on the value of the homes in the neighborhood. And so his life and my life would have been different. This is why I say all the time that there's nothing wrong with Black people that ending racism can't solve. When things go wrong in Black communities, we're constantly blaming Black people. We don't look at the overarching policy context that extract wealth from Black communities daily. I'm going to show you a clip from a hearing I did a few years back after this report was released, and it received significant attention. But we were called to Capitol Hill to talk about appraisals, and you might have heard in the news there was recently, just a few days ago, a couple in the Bay Area that got an appraisal done, but the original appraisal came in very low after they put in $400,000 of home improvements. Now, this is a Black couple. Now, when they felt that something was fishy, so what they did was whitewash the home. They got rid of all the Black books, all the clothing, any kind of suggestion that Black people lived in the home, the paintings, the pictures. And then they also got a white stand-in for a second appraisal. Now, what happened after that, the appraisal came in $500,000 higher than the original appraisal. Now, this is happening all over the country. People are doing these experiments on their own. Now, I just want to show you a clip when we presented these findings 2 years ago before families started doing this experiment. I want you to take a look at and listen to this basic question that we're asked. Do we feel discrimination? Is there discrimination in the appraisal process?
If you think Black people are being discriminated when their property is being appraised, would you kindly raise your hand? One person on the panel. If you think that, for fear that I'm not communicating well, if you think that Black people are not being discriminated against when their property is being appraised, if you think they're not being discriminated against, kindly raise your hand. Okay, hands now, we're getting some consternation, I see.
Now, I show that clip not to shame people, but to say that too often we simply deny that racism exists, that we have the evidence, and yet people will say, no, that's not the issue. No, that's not the issue. And we resort to blaming people. You know, one of my favorite quotes is from Vietnamese philosopher Thich Nhat Hanh. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing that, but that quote goes something like, if you're growing a head of lettuce and it's not growing, you don't blame the lettuce. You see if it's getting water, you see if it's getting sunlight, you see if the soil's enriched. When things aren't growing in Black communities, we blame the lettuce, we blame the people. It's past time that we looked at the policy conditions that extract wealth and opportunity from people every day. I'm just going to, before I get into the next section, I just wanted this throw out some other evidence of discrimination. We know that Black Americans are largely unbanked at higher rates than their white collar bars. See that blue line? That represents the level of people who are banked by a community. And we see that many Black people are not, Black people among the major racial categories, and excuse me, the Native Americans are not on this chart, but we know that Black people are severely underrepresented in banking. And so what we need to do, we need to increase support for small dollar mortgage loan programs. Many of the areas in which devaluation is occurring, there are many homes available, but they're priced below a point where a bank will back with a mortgage. And so we need increase for small dollar mortgages. We must reduce uneven costs of mortgages for Black homeowners. We know that we're paying higher interest rates. We need to extend credit and down payment assistance to borrowers impacted by discrimination. There are a lot of restorative policies out there, and we need to figure out ways to get people down payment assistance, because that's how discrimination really shows up in the home buying process. People don't have the discretionary income to put down that down payment. And we also need to adopt credit scoring practices with less discriminatory impact. The credit bureaus are now exploring what they're calling character credit. They're looking at the ability to pay utility bills and rent as a form of credit. And so let's encourage that kind of behavior. We do need to increase diversity in the appraisal profession. 90% of appraisers are white, 75% are male, and we know that all value is socially constructed, and so we really do need to diversify the field. And we need to continue with stimulus and relief efforts for homeowners and buyers. But I'm going to just pivot quickly here to business, because we know that most people start their businesses using the equity in their home. So if you have less equity, you have less capacity to start a business. Black people comprise about 14% of the population, but Black businesses are only 2% of the nation's employer firms, meaning firms with more than one employee. And just to make this clear, if Black businesses were the equivalent of the Black population, there would be 800,000 more Black businesses. So if we improve home ownership and improve investment in businesses, we enlarge in the proverbial pie, that more jobs are created, more revenue spills into neighborhoods. In this regard, equity is stimulus. And right now, St. Louis actually has the highest ratio of Black people to businesses, about 50%. And so, but you can see most places are not at the levels of St. Louis. As I said, Black people are about 13% of the population, but only 2% of employer firms. Only 1% of Black business owners were able to obtain a loan in the founding year, compared to 7% of white entrepreneurs. And Black entrepreneurs are denied bank loans more than twice as often as their white peers. People of color pay higher interest rates when we do get loans. And we know that Black businesses are shuttered during these economic shocks. About half of Black businesses survived the Great Recession compared to 60% of white-owned firms. And we know that the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, Paycheck Protection Program, essentially shut out most Black businesses because they did not account for originally sole proprietorships, because as I mentioned, 95% of Black businesses are sole proprietorship, so we could not take advantage of that of subsidy. But a lot of people, again, will say that the lack of investment in Black businesses is a result of quality. So we wanted to explore that issue as well. So what we did was we got business revenue from Dun & Bradstreet. We also got the race of the owner. But then we scraped all the Yelp data from businesses all across the country to get that sense of quality. And again, we control for neighborhood conditions, spending power, education, other variables, because again, we wanted a apples to apples comparison between businesses. And what we found is, might surprise some, Black, brown, and Asian businesses are rated higher on Yelp than our white counterparts. And it's not significant, but it is higher, consistently higher. But businesses in Black neighborhoods receive fewer stars. I'll explain this. You see that magenta line? That's Black, brown, and Asian businesses. See that gray line? That's white businesses. In all neighborhoods, Black, brown, and Asian businesses actually score higher. However, look at this bottom line again. That represents the share of the Black population. As the share of the Black population increases, the Yelp ratings decrease. So you're seeing the perception of Black neighborhoods drive down the perception of businesses in them. And those businesses experience lower revenue growth as a result. It's costing highly rated businesses upwards of $4 billion annually. Now, there's a saying that I would hear all the time in the community where I grew up. The elders would say, our ice is just as cold. Our ice is just as cold. The elders knew that if you don't frequent businesses in the hood, you distort the market in a way where you force high quality businesses to compete with low quality businesses. You get less revenue, you get less development overall. And so the elders are right. This plays out empirically. Our ice is just as cold. And so we need to really figure out ways to invest in Black businesses because they're of the quality of deserving of that investment. Now, how do you counter devaluation? I have three major areas that I say, how do you counter this phenomenon? First, you got to invest in people. You got to direct capital towards Black, Indigenous, brown, and Asian-owned firms, essentially cutting the check to homeowners, to business owners, to potential business owners and potential homeowners. And I'll explain why. If you invest, I'll go to the second column. If you invest in place and not people, if you invest in brick and mortar, you essentially will raise the property values, and if people won't keep pace with that, and eventually they'll be pushed out. So you got to figure out ways to develop people. Now, we do need to remove the unnecessary bureaucratic barriers to entry into home ownership and business ownership. I've been to many different programs, and one of the things that you see is that in order for Black people, entrepreneurs, or homeowners to get a grant or a loan or to take advantage, they have people go through some kind of financial literacy course. But what the business data shows us that we don't need financial literacy any more than other groups. What we do need is investment. Now, we do need to invest in places. I want to be clear about that. Because of devaluation, there are just less resources in places to help develop the area. And so we need to make targeted infrastructure investments in Black neighborhoods. We must partner with businesses and developers to incentivize renovation and provide commercial spaces. One of my greatest fears with presenting that data that we saw, that I didn't want people to think that they should not start a business in a Black community. And so what I would, and I mean, I was very nervous about that. But what I will say, we do need to create incentives for entrepreneurs, for business owners to site their businesses in Black areas. And then finally, we need to divest from racism. We need to remove policies that extract wealth from Black communities. Just as we score policies, budgets, impact, we should score for racial equity as well. So oftentimes we try to deal with racism on the back end. We need to understand the potential impacts of racism before they occur. And we need to install anti-racist policies that encourage inclusion. You know, I do a lot of work around this appraisal issue, and it is clear that we need new standards there. When you compare homes to other homes in the same neighborhood that's been discriminated against, and that's the common practice to assess value. What happens when you compare homes to others in neighborhoods that's been discriminated against, you effectively recycle the discrimination over and over again. So we need new systems that encourage anti-racism. But I want to get to this business of the benefits on this. That, again, that Black people comprise about 14% of the population, but we're only 2% of the nation's employer firms. And remember, I said if Black businesses were the equivalent of the Black population, there would be more than 800,000 more businesses. Not only that, let's go to St. Louis. Black people comprise about 20% of the St. Louis metro area, but Black businesses are only 11% of the metro's 31,000 employer businesses. And remember, although they're underrepresented, St. Louis represents the highest in terms of the population to business ratio. Now, if Black businesses were the equivalent of the Black population, there would be an additional 6,000 more businesses. Now, if Black businesses increase their average revenue to the level of non-Black businesses, we would see an increase in total revenue of $42 billion. If the average employees per Black business increased to 25, approximately 131,000 jobs would be added. And if Black businesses were the equivalent of the Black population and increased their employment to the level of non-Black businesses, they would create 200,000 and 280,000 more jobs. Now, again, a lot of this you can find in my book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities, available wherever fine books are sold. Now, I'm going to close by just explaining why I named my book Know Your Price and a little bit of the motivation behind it. My favorite play in the whole wide world is Two Trains Running by August Wilson. The great late August Wilson. It's set in Pittsburgh, my hometown. And in the play, the main character, Memphis, is about to have his property seized through eminent domain by the city of Pittsburgh. The city of Pittsburgh offers Memphis $15,000 for his restaurant, his business, for his property. The main character, Memphis, says, "No, I'm not selling my property for $15,000. I got my price. I know my price." I'm paraphrasing, but it's a refrain stated throughout the play. I got my price. I know my price. Now there's another character, Hambone. Hambone, he's struggling, so he asks the proprietor, can he paint a fence in exchange for a ham? So he paints the fence, but he never gets his ham. And throughout the play, the main character says, Hambone, the character Hambone, says throughout the play, "Give me my ham, give me my ham." Now, we don't know if Hambone had mental illness before he painted the fence, but eventually he goes mad and dies demanding his ham. Now, I know people are like, well, that's a sad story. but there's actually a happy ending. The main character, Memphis, gets $35,000, well above the original asking price because of his constant demanding. And the moral of the story is you got to know you have worth. What I try to do with my book, Know Your Price, is give people the price to stand on, even if it means going crazy and dying as a result. Life is not worth living if you cannot get your value. And so for me, as you can see, I try to make a head case with my numbers. I try to make a heart case with using my story and other stories. But sometimes you just got to make a demand for this stuff. People won't give basic human rights without a fight. And so what, again, I work at a think tank. I'm going to make that head case. I'm going to make that heart case. But I want my research to get in the hands of people who will make a demand. So thank you for this presentation. I hope it was to your liking. And I'm looking forward to some questions from the audience because I know I just poured a lot of information at you. So let's get at it.
Okay, Dr. Perry, thank you so much for that presentation. I'm going to get out my glasses so I can read this chat. We have a few questions in the chat, one of which people would like to invite you to their campus or their community. Would you be willing to add your contact information in the chat for our participants? They really want to bring you back to their communities. And while doing that, the one question that I had was, do you have a nationwide figure for the impact or the effect of COVID-19 on Black business, on the closures of Black business? Is there a number yet? We're still in it, I know.
We're still in it, and it goes up and down. Actually, you know, while Black businesses were initially most affected, we saw actually a spike in Black business development, and it was highest in Black communities, which is, it's not surprising. You know, a lot of people said, oh, that's a good thing, but it probably means unemployment is high in those areas and that people use their recovery funds to start businesses. So that's a good thing, but it's what we've always done. We use the resources at our disposal to cope with the discrimination in job markets. And so but the numbers have yet to be determined because technically we're still in the throes of a pandemic.
Too soon to tell then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do see a couple of other questions. Is there a financial institution that currently is backed by Black, Brown, or Asian community stakeholders? Would that be another hurdle to helping our communities bring wealth to them?
Well, I'm actually an advisor for Known Holdings. Known Holdings. So look that up. Just announced last week, Black, Indigenous, Brown folks who are forming what we would call a mothership to actually build up the scale of many different businesses, or financial service businesses, banks, credit unions, will fund funds. And so Known Holdings is something, but I say this, you know, there's a lot of talk about creating more Black banks and financial institutions that are primarily driven by people of color, but we also need mainstream banks to work for us. You know, we should have, it should be an and, that we need more Black, Brown, Asian, and Indigenous led banks. But we also need these mainstream banks to work for us. I mean, they are gifted with many different tax incentives and other benefits, and yet we are not getting the services we deserve. So let's do both. Let's do both. I see that Sabrina has her hands up in Mobile, Alabama. I spent some time there. I lived in New Orleans for 14 years, so I know a little bit of the landscape.
Yes.
So
Can I ask?
Yes,
May I
go
ask-
ahead.
Hi, how's everyone today?
doing well. How are you?
I'm
Great.
fine. Yes, I am Sabrina Mass. I'm the Public Relations Officer for the Human Relations Commission here in Mobile, Alabama. I've been very involved in this city for 17 years. I'm actually a native Texan. But you were very informative today on some things that I wasn't even aware of. And so I appreciate you on your panel today. And I also have a question. Actually, you kind of chimed in on it just a minute ago when you talked about the black owned banks. So being that said, do you think that it would be more progressive or could possibly be progressive for the mainstream banks to collaborate with the black banks to conglomerate in some kind of a way so that we can not only maybe bank at a black bank or even at a mainstream bank together, because I bank at a black bank and a major bank credit union. So do you think the possibilities of them to conglomerating in that aspect would be possible, or what do you think about that idea, so that the minorities and really all people can get the benefits of both entities? What would you think about that?
Yeah. Sabrina, you're on to something, because after this, when the pandemic set in and the Treasury would decide that the Treasury will work with mainstream banks, there was a problem and an opportunity. The problem was that, as I mentioned, Black people are largely unbanked at higher rates. And so banks will deal with their customers first. And that's what happened, that the banks dealt with their existing customers before they dealt with anybody else. So Black people were pushed out, and so we needed to work with CDFIs, credit unions, banks that have a better track record of working with Black and brown folk, BIPOC communities. But even then, those banks are really high touch, low volume. And so when we gave the big banks the billions of dollars to distribute, we should have actually compelled the big banks to lend out their fintech services to Black, brown, and Asian-owned banks, so that they could get customers at a scale that would also increase their business. And so in the future, if mainstream organizations get something, they should be forced to work with banks and other service industries that work more closely and more effectively with BIPOC communities.
I have another question in chat. Ken Gunn is asking, for those towns where homes in Black communities exceeded the value of similar homes in white communities, what's the difference? Was it the onset of gentrification or something else?
I mean, some of that is actually true. There's some of that in gentrification, but in some areas like Nashville, you still have significant percentage of Black owners in Black neighborhoods. Largely, they're older, and so there's going to be some turnover there in the future. But you also have anchor institutions in places like Nashville, Meharry Medical School, Black-led medical school, Fisk University. You have the seminary, and so people are employed. They have benefits. They have larger. I mean, they may have lower incomes, but they still have a higher chance of owning a home and investing in the neighborhood. And so it's not surprising you see it there, and you see similar things everywhere. The area I think that we should caution ourselves. There were a lot of green in Florida. That was probably due to the number of retirement communities that distorted our findings a bit. And so, but there are some places where the economic conditions support higher valuations of homes there.
I think Javier is going to recognize some more raised hands. Javier?
Oh, and I think Dante is, I think it's Dante.
Dante
Yes.
Bonner, yes.
Yes,
You may
Andre beat me
unmute.
to that.
He beat you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Perry. My name is Dante Bonner. I'm the Educational Outreach Training Coordinator with the Florida Commission on Human Relations here in Tallahassee, Florida. And I do appreciate your presentation. My question is, with all the findings that you have discovered with the inequities within the Black community, what has been done to talk to the decision makers to change their policies, such as you've done the research concerning about the appraisers being valued differently? So the decision makers of the companies making that decisions, what has been done in those arenas, as well as with the banks as decision makers, to get them to change their policies so they would work more equitably with all the communities? Thank you.
Yeah, you know, right now, I will say this, the Biden administration is working through HUD, and they just formed an interagency task force on appraisals that was just launched last month. So they are taking action. On the issue of appraisals, what's alarming about it is that there's really not a lot of recourse for buyers and sellers if they sense something is wrong. I mean, most complaints are rejected. Something like 93% of recalls on original appraisals are rejected, and so people are stuck with lower values. And so what I'm hoping this interagency task force will eventually do is to create, let's say, a median list price for homes in an area. If they go below, if the appraisal goes below a certain price point, then it will trigger a second appraisal. We also need to diversify the field. We know that all value is socially constructed, meaning our upbringings, our socialization assigns importance and worth to otherwise inanimate objects. And 95%, around 90% of appraisers are white. 75% are white male. So we also need to diversify the field of appraisals there. But it goes without saying that I don't believe that this is just an appraiser issue. I think that if given the data, we would be able to look at underwriting practices. We will be able to look at real estate agent behavior. We really do need to scrub the process so that we restore the value that's extracted by racism, and clean up these practices that essentially reproduce inequality without anyone lighting up a tiki torch or wearing a hood. That there are practices that extract wealth every single day and harm entire communities as a result. So I think there's a role for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's unclear what that role would be because they have limited scope on housing issues. But right now there's just so little recourse. So we are really dependent upon regular people making a demand. That these folks that you see in the news who are suing, who are using these social experiments by getting white stand-ins for a second appraisal, they're using the media effectively to set up lawsuits and or to shame people to get their value. and it seems to be working. We need to keep putting pressure on these institutions to give people a different level of recourse if they feel that their appraisal low. So, you know, some of this is just not accurate. I mean, the couple in Northern California put in $400,000 of work in their home, and their appraisal came in lower than it was originally.
Mm.
I just, you know,
Unbelievable.
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 So there are things that we can do and we should do, but that's what I'll be working on in the near future. So look out for me.
We're going to be watching, Dr. Perry. You're doing some good work. And I tell you, our participants are asking if it would be possible to get a copy of your data, of your statistics that you shared today. Would you be able to send that to us and we can share it?
A PDF of the slides. I'll make sure that those go out. And also get my book, Know Your Price.
Yes. Know your price.
Know
You
your
got to say it like that, right? Know your price.
Know your price.
Available at wherever you buy your books, right?
Wherever fine books are sold.
Fine books are sold. Okay, that's
right.
on my shopping list for the holidays. I'm going to get that one. Thank you so much, Dr. Perry. We appreciate you, and your work and your research is exciting to all of us. And also, too, I just want to thank you, and then to give our participants a heads up that we will be doing a survey on this session. So if you would hang tight, here it comes. There we go. You have a few minutes to complete that survey. Thanks again to Dr. Perry, and he will be sending the PDF of the presentation, so you'll be able to receive that. The committee will make sure that you get it. And then I would also like to just, while you're filling that out, move into the next session, which will start at 1:05, and it is a plenary session entitled Unpacking Critical Race Theory.